I wasn't born into wealth, not even close. My earliest memory is of my mom wrapping me in a coat she borrowed from a neighbor because ours had holes. The Chicago winter bit through fabric like it had teeth. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment, cracked walls, flickering lights, and a heater that coughed more than it worked. My mom held two jobs. My dad had disappeared before I could pronounce his name, and dinner was usually split between Hope and whatever we could microwave. At 13, I started working. Not for pocket money, there was no such thing in our world, but because the electricity bill was overdue. I bagged groceries, scrubbed diner floors, ran errands. Every dollar had weight, every cent was accounted for. There were nights I stared at the ceiling wondering if I'd ever escape the cycle, wondering if all this grinding would ever mean something.
School was my sanctuary.
Books made sense when life didn't. While other kids dreamed of being athletes or rappers, I studied financial statements like they were treasure maps. I'd sneak into the public library and absorb stories of people who'd built empires from nothing. Howard Schultz, Jan Koum, Oprah, proof that hardship wasn't a life sentence. But inspiration isn't a meal. At 16, we were evicted. I remember my mom holding back tears while trying to smile, saying, "Maybe it's a sign we're meant for bigger things." We moved into a shelter. It was the lowest point of my life, and yet something shifted in me. Not resentment, but resolve. I started flipping old phones on Craigslist. I'd fix cracked screens, replace batteries, and sell them at a profit. I watched YouTube tutorials under a single shelter-provided lamp, soldering wires while others slept. My first flip earned me $40. The second? $75. By the end of that month, I had $300 and a growing obsession with leverage. At 18, I landed a scholarship to a local community college. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough. I studied business by day and ran an online dropshipping store by night. I slept 4 hours a night, lived on instant noodles, and reinvested every dime. When my classmates partied, I packed orders and answered customer emails. Discipline became my religion. The turning point came in sophomore year. I built a simple budgeting app for students. Nothing fancy, just a clean UI and a sync-to-bank feature. I posted it on Reddit and overnight, it went viral. Downloads exploded. A venture capitalist emailed me the next day asking if I'd thought about scaling.
I didn't even know what that meant.
He mentored me, introduced me to developers, helped me pitch. We rebranded, relaunched, and within a year, we had over 500,000 users. Investors started calling us. I remember sitting in my dorm room, staring at an email with an acquisition offer, $2.4 million. I nearly dropped my phone. I didn't take it. People thought I was insane, especially my mom. She cried when I turned it down. But I told her, that's not the mountain I want to climb. It's just a hill. We kept building. I dropped out of college, moved into a cramped office with a fold-out bed, and doubled down. My team and I were relentless. We pivoted the app into a full-fledged financial planning platform. It wasn't just for students anymore. It was for anyone trying to take control of their money. 5 years later, we went public. I was 27 when I became a millionaire. Not on paper. Real money. Liquid. But I didn't feel different. Not really. The grind was still in me. The hunger didn't vanish, it evolved. Now I wasn't working to escape poverty. I was working to fulfill a purpose. And that's where this story really begins. Because money reveals people. It amplifies their core. And I was about to test someone else's. Not to judge them, not to shame them, but to see what kindness looked like when no one was watching. Money makes you invisible in a strange way. Not physically, but emotionally. People treat you based on what they see. The suit, the car, the rumors. They tailor their actions to your status. It's why, after my company IPO'd and I was officially a billionaire, I stopped recognizing sincerity. Was that smile genuine or strategic? Was she laughing at my jokes, or the size of my bank account? People saw my name in Forbes, but none of them saw me. That's what led me to the diner.
It was a Tuesday. Drizzly.
I wore a worn-out hoodie, thrift store jeans, and sneakers held together by stubborn stitches. I'd even rubbed oil on the cuffs to make them look older. I left my Tesla in the garage and took a bus 3 stops past my building. The diner was a place I'd bought 2 years ago as part of a community redevelopment project. It was losing money, but I kept it afloat out of nostalgia and heart. I'd eaten there once, back when I had $6 to my name and needed warmth more than food. The owner had let me sit for hours. Never rushed me.
Never judged me.
So I kept it running. Quietly. Anonymously. That morning, I walked in like a ghost from the past. No fanfare. No entourage. Just a stranger looking for coffee and maybe a little dignity. And then she appeared. Her name tag read Isla. She looked tired, like life had been working overtime on her soul. But her smile? It had fight in it. The kind that says, "I've been knocked down, but I'm still standing." "Cold out there, huh?" she asked, handing me a menu I pretended to read. "You want something warm, hun?" "Coffee's on me." I hesitated. "You sure?" I asked. I don't have much." She nodded. "Neither do I. But we've got heat, chairs, and caffeine. That counts for something." I sat, unsure of how to respond. She poured me coffee and walked away like she hadn't just made my chest tighten. I watched her serve a table of noisy teens, then pivot to an elderly couple. She moved like she'd been dancing this routine for years, each step familiar, each smile earned. Her tips looked light, her patience heavy. I asked about the soup. "Not great," she said with a wink. "But I'll throw in a biscuit. It helps." Again on the house. I wanted to pay. I could have bought the entire block. But I wasn't here to flash cash. I was here to see what kindness looked like when it wasn't chasing reward. We talked while she wiped tables. She was 28. Single mom. Her son, Benji, was 8, had cerebral palsy. His father walked out the moment they got the diagnosis. She worked 2 jobs, studied at night to become a nurse, and still found time to help an old man at the bus stop down the street, every Thursday, rain or shine. "You always this nice to strangers?" I asked, sipping the lukewarm soup. Her laugh was dry. "No. Just to the ones who look like they need a win." I stared into that cup, feeling something unfamiliar swell inside me. Guilt, maybe. Or admiration. I wasn't sure. But I knew I had to come back. And I did. Every day that week I returned. Sat in the same booth. Ordered the same soup. Wore the same broken shoes. And every day, Isla brought warmth that couldn't be microwaved. Not once did she ask for anything. Not once did she treat me differently. On Friday, I pretended to be short on change. "Hey," I said sheepishly. "Mind if I cover tomorrow?" She slid the check aside. "You're good." "No, You're good," she repeated. Firmer now. "This world's got enough people counting coins and forgetting kindness. You're safe here." I nodded, throat dry. As I walked out into the rain, I knew something had changed. This wasn't just about testing kindness anymore. It was about remembering it, about seeing what real wealth looked like, and realizing, maybe for the first time in years, that I'd lost something money couldn't buy. I didn't sleep much that weekend. I kept thinking about Isla, how she served with strength, gave without hesitation, and carried burdens in silence. People like her were the reason I'd once dreamed of making it big, to protect the ones the world forgets, to lift those who always lift others. But somewhere along the way, I'd started seeing spreadsheets instead of stories. That following Monday, I sat in my usual spot again. Same seat. Same soup. Isla greeted me like she always did, warm smile, tired eyes. But that day, I wasn't wearing the usual disguise. I wore a crisp button-down, shoes that actually fit, and a watch that most people wouldn't recognize unless they'd been in certain circles. Her eyes scanned me, confused. "You look different." I smiled. "I am." She laughed nervously. "New job or something?" "Something like that." The manager, a guy named Rick, who barely noticed I existed all week, walked over. When he saw me, his entire posture shifted. "Mr. Cade, we weren't expecting you today. Let me get you a proper table." Isla blinked. "Wait." "Mr. Cade?" I nodded slowly, rising from my booth. I own this place. She froze. Her eyes darted between me and Rick, then down at her tray. I stepped closer. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell the whole story. I needed to see something for myself. And Isla, I paused. You showed me more in 5 days than I've learned in 5 years. Her voice was barely a whisper. Why? Because I lost sight of what mattered. I used to believe in people. I built everything I have on the idea that goodness was still out there. Then the money came, the fame, and everything got loud. She set down her tray. I didn't do anything special, she said, voice cracking. Yes, you did, I replied. You saw a man who looked like he had nothing, and you gave him everything you could without expecting a single thing in return. Her lip trembled. People like you, I continued, you're the reason I made it out. People who give, even when they're the ones in need. There was a beat of silence. The whole diner seemed to pause. Then I pulled a folded piece of paper from my coat. It was a scholarship form, fully funded. 4 years of nursing school, tuition, books, supplies, all paid.
For you, I said.
No strings attached. She stared at it like it might vanish. I wasn't done. And there's something else. I'm launching a new foundation, the Isla Fund. It'll provide grants for single parents pursuing healthcare careers. First in line, Benji's mom. Her hand flew to her mouth. She backed away, shaking her head. I can't accept this. You already earned it, I said gently. This is just the receipt. Tears filled her eyes, and I could tell she wasn't used to this. Being seen, being chosen, being celebrated. And I'll admit it, I was crying too, because it had been years since I'd felt something so pure, so real. I'd built billion-dollar platforms, closed deals in glass towers, flown private jets across continents, but nothing compared to the feeling of handing a life-changing opportunity to someone who actually deserved it. Someone who didn't ask but always gave. I walked her outside after her shift. Rain was falling again, just like the first day I met her. Why did you come here? She asked. To find out if kindness still existed in the world. And, she asked, wiping her eyes. I smiled, looking up at the gray sky. It does. And she makes a mean cup of coffee. She laughed through her tears, and in that moment, everything felt right again. A year passed. And in that year, everything changed. Isla graduated from her accelerated nursing program with honors. I was there in the front row, watching as she crossed the stage, her cap tilted awkwardly, her smile a radiant rebellion against every hardship she'd ever faced. Benji sat beside me in his wheelchair, fists clenched with excitement, shouting, "That's my mom." He didn't know it then, but he'd helped shape the next chapter of my life. I'd spent a decade building wealth, acquiring companies, growing margins. Yet in one rain-soaked diner, Isla had reminded me what actual impact looks like. So I shifted gears, sold off a portion of my shares, stepped back from day-to-day operations. The board thought I was losing my edge. But I wasn't stepping down, I was stepping up. The Isla Fund became more than a project, it became a movement. We started in Chicago, awarding scholarships to single parents in healthcare. Then we expanded New York, Detroit, Oakland. Soon, we were funding vocational schools, childcare programs, mental health services. All inspired by a waitress who once gave a free biscuit to a man she thought had nothing. But let me be honest, this wasn't just about giving back. It was about finding something I'd forgotten. Purpose. The world of the wealthy often feels like a glass castle, shiny, isolated, untouchable. But when you break the glass, when you walk barefoot into places where struggle lives, you remember that humanity is raw, unpolished, and achingly beautiful. I started returning to the diner every Sunday, not in disguise, just as myself, as Cade, the man behind the fortune, but also the man who once had nothing but dreams and soup. Isla still worked there part-time, not because she needed the money anymore, but because the diner had become her home. Her roots. One night, she sat across from me after closing. Same booth. Same corner table. "You know," she said, stirring her tea, "when you first walked in, I thought you were lost. I laughed. I was. She glanced up. But you had everything. Not really, I admitted. I had money, yeah, but not clarity, not connection. She nodded. And now?
Now.
I smiled. I'm wealthy. She tilted her head. Didn't you already say that? I leaned back. Not like this. This kind of wealth isn't counted in dollars. It's measured in people, in legacies, in the lives you touch when you think no one's watching. She let that sink in, then asked something that stayed with me. Do you think you came here to test me, or did the universe send you here to test yourself? I didn't answer. I just looked around the diner. The chipped tiles, the buzz of the overhead lights, the place where I met someone who changed my life without knowing it. She passed me a photo from her purse. It was of Benji at school, standing with a walker, arms raised in triumph, next to a science project about the human heart. He says he wants to be a doctor now, she whispered. My throat tightened. That photo, more than any magazine feature, Forbes mention, or business award, became the symbol of my real success. Not the billion in the bank, but the boy who believed he could heal others because someone first believed in his mother. Today, I speak to rooms filled with suits and silence. I tell them about Isla, about kindness without agenda, about testing the world not with numbers, but with humility. I tell them that the truest way to build an empire is to start by serving. And every time I step off that stage, I remember that rainy day when a waitress gave a stranger coffee and hope. She thought I was the one in need. Turns out I was. And thanks to her, I found everything I never knew I was looking for. Not fortune, not fame, but meaning. The kind of wealth that lives on long after the bank statements fade. The kind of wealth that begins with a biscuit and ends with a legacy. And that's a kind of billionaire I'll always be proud to be.